Welcome to Lecture 1, Why Good Decisions Fail. Before we delve into this topic, let's put this course into context. Organizations make employment decisions every day. Organizations will make decisions about hiring, about promotions, compensation, restructuring, accommodation, performance expectations, workplace investigations, and yes, terminations. Some of these decisions are routine, some are strategic, some are administrative. All of them are important. But in this course, we are not concerned with every employment decision. We are concerned specifically with disciplinary and termination decisions. And that distinction is intentional. Why? Because disciplinary and termination decisions sit at the point where authority, consequence, and risk converge. These are the decisions that are most likely to be challenged. These are the decisions that actually affect livelihoods directly. And these are the decisions that are most frequently reviewed by external bodies when things go wrong. In other words, if a workplace decision is going to unravel, it's most likely going to be here. Disciplinary decisions are not simply internal management tools. They carry real organizational consequences. Underperformance, for example, if left unaddressed, it is costly. It drains productivity, affects team morale, it increases supervisory burden, and eventually can erode client confidence. Research in workforce economics consistently shows that sustained underperformance has compounding financial implications, especially in knowledge-based environments where output depends heavily on coordination and trust. Misconduct. This matters even more. In cases involving harassment, safety violations, fraud, insubordination, the risk extends beyond productivity, and an employee can harm themselves, others, vendors, clients, the organization's public reputation. Misconduct decisions, therefore, operate at the intersection of compliance, culture, and risk management. And then there's gross misconduct. Gross misconduct is different in character almost entirely. It's typically framed as conduct so serious that it goes to the heart of the employment relationship. And this is a phrase that appears repeatedly across jurisdictions, the heart of the employment relationship. Well, what sits at the heart of the employment relationship is trust. Employment relationships are built on mutual trust and confidence. So when an organization concludes that the trust has been fundamentally breached, termination is almost often immediate. But because gross misconduct decisions are so serious, they are also the most scrutinized. You see, the higher the consequence, the higher the expectation of structure. That is why disciplinary and termination decisions deserve disciplined thinking. Now let's turn and consider something that is very often overlooked. Who actually reviews these decisions? And in what circumstances? Well, reviewers can take many forms. They can be internal appeals panels, external investigators, they may be arbitrators in unionized environments, labor tribunals, regulatory bodies, employment standards authorities, or even courts. In some cases, they can be civil juries. Others may be professional licensing bodies or oversight commissions. Now, each of these bodies operate under their own jurisprudence and statutory framework. A tribunal, for example, may assess whether termination was for a just cause under the employment law legislation. An arbitrator, for example, may evaluate whether the discipline met the standards of progressive discipline under a collective agreement. A court may assess whether procedural fairness was observed and whether the decision was reasonable in the circumstances. So we see that technical tests differ. The statutory language differs. The evidentiary standards differ. But broadly speaking, they all evaluate similar core questions. Was the process fair? Was the investigation proportionate? Was the evidence credible and sufficiently tested? Was the outcome reasonable in light of the established facts? Can the reasoning be followed? Importantly, reviewers don't evaluate how confident you felt about your decision. They evaluate what can be demonstrated. They assess the visible structure of the decision. And this is why understanding what reviewers actually evaluate matters so much. If you know what scrutiny looks like later, you can build toward it earlier. Modern HR guidance, including frameworks promoted by professional bodies such as the Society of Human Resources Management, for example, consistently emphasize that fairness, consistency, documentation, and proportionality, these are the foundational principles. In parallel research in behavioral decision-making, that warns against confirmation bias, premature closure, overconfidence under time pressure. So across disciplines, the message is similar. Structured thinking produces stronger outcomes, more so than instinct alone. Yet in practice, organizations often default to instinct. And this brings us to what I call the structure gap. The structure gap is the difference between internal certainty and external defensibility. It is the gap between we know what happened and we can show what happened. Consider a few organizational patterns. An organization receives a complaint. It moves quickly. Interviews are conducted, but only with witnesses who support the initial allegation. Contradictions are noted, but they're not fully explored. The decision letter is strong, but the underlying file contains thin factual detail. Decision is reviewed later. The conclusion feels heavier than the evidence beneath it. Consider the long-serving employee, one who is labeled disruptive. Management has years of frustration. Everyone internally agrees performance has been problematic the whole way through. But the documentation consists largely of adjectives: negative, argumentative, not a team player, without any concrete examples. Well, to the external reviewer, the history is invisible. The progression cannot be seen, so the outcome appears abrupt. One more case. An external investigator is retained. The report is lengthy, interviews are numerous, the file appears busy with a lot going on, but the reasoning connecting the evidence to the conclusion, that's thin. Credibility findings are implied rather than explained. Policies are quoted, but not clearly applied. The steps are present, but the thinking is invisible. Those aren't examples of bad faith necessarily. They're examples of insufficient structure. Across employment law literature and cognitive research alike, one theme emerges repeatedly: Decisions fail less often because they're outrageous and more often because they're underexplained. When reasoning is not visible, reviewers have to fill in the gaps themselves. And when reviewers must build the bridge between allegation and conclusion, well, the confidence in the decision diminishes. And that is the structure gap. And that is what this course is designed to close. So we are not here to make you cautious for the sake of caution. We're here to make your decision making visible, deliberate, and defensible. Because in disciplinary and termination matters, the strength of your outcome depends less on the authority that you hold and more on the structure that you build beneath the decisions. In the lectures that follow, we will begin constructing that structure step by step.